Hi, my name is Lorraine Watry and welcome to my studio. I am a watercolor artist and I've worked with watercolor for 26 years now, and I thought I would start a new series of videos where I go over different tips, tricks, and techniques for working with watercolor. And hopefully these short videos will help you in your journey, and if you have a question or a technique that you would like to see, please comment below and I will try to accommodate that in a future video. Hi, I had a question from one of my subscribers on how to frame a watercolor and try to keep the price down. And so I thought I would talk about a few things having to do with that. And then at the end of the video, I recorded myself cutting a double matte and framing a painting. And it will be sped up, but I will voice over a little bit of it so that you'll understand what I'm doing. And one of the things to think about when you are framing a watercolor is that in general, watercolors need the protection of glass or plexiglass to keep the watercolor from either fading or possibly getting damaged in the environment. If it got wet or humidity could cause the paint to lift or have issues and also fade. So the watercolor the glass and the plexi are a way to protect the watercolor, as most of you will know. And then the matte is important because you don't want the watercolor sitting right up next to the glass or the plexi. And I have matted and framed my paintings now for probably about 25 years. When I first began painting in watercolor, I had a matte cut at a local craft store, and I was just shocked by the price and the fact that I did not get any of the spare pieces of board that were cut off. And so I decided that I would buy my own matte cutter and figure out how to do the matting myself. And then over time, I have found a company that I like the frames from, and they have good prices. And so I tend to buy most of my frames from American Frame. And I do have a video that talks about American Frame and their frames. And I will link that below in the description. So if you want to see that video, I will have that link there. And so what I have on my table is a different way that you can create a watercolor, and the framing is a little less expensive because it doesn't require plexi and glass or a mat. And this is on Watercolor Canvas as well as this one. Actually, this one may be on regular canvas, and then I used Daniel Smith transparent watercolor ground on the surface of this regular canvas, and then this transparent ground basically acts like watercolor paper once you've painted it on and let it dry, and then you can just paint watercolor over the surface. So this one is the transparent watercolor ground, but you can also get titanium white one. Then they have some other colors as well. And that seems to work pretty good. And then both of these, the watercolor canvas comes with a surface that is already set up to do watercolor on. And then once they are dry and you're done with your painting, then you need to seal them. And so I use now, I think I was just using a regular acrylic sealer when I first started, and now I'm using this Krylon UV archival sealer, and I like the satin. I don't like it to be too shiny, but I don't want it to be a flat matte look either. And this one is advanced non-yellowing, protection against fading dirt and moisture. And what I generally do is once I'm done with a painting, I will stand it up and in a well-ventilated area, probably a box around it just to keep the spray from getting anywhere else. And I will spray one direction and then I'll rotate it and I'll spray the next direction. And you want to follow the guidelines on the can, make sure you're staying back and that you're just using a fine coat. You don't want to get too heavy with the spray, or it can look like it's dripping. Now, I think when I sprayed this one, I used a matte finish, and so it does have a little bit of a flatter look to it. And this one either is the satin or the gloss. So I have changed what I'm using, and so these two are the other looks. This particular canvas is a wider canvas, and so it has the sides that you can paint, or you could just paint them a solid color. And I liked putting the image around the sides, and so it comes already in this form, and then I just painted on the watercolor ground to then be able to paint on this canvas. This canvas is in a frame called a floating frame, and because it's got the dark interior, I went ahead and on the edges of this painting, I painted them black. And that may be a little hard to see in the video, but I didn't paint down the sides of this image. And any of the white that's on this canvas is just the white of the canvas. So it's just, for me, the same thing as painting on paper. And then this one is sealed on the back, so you won't be able to tell, but basically it's an open back, and you can screw in through the painting, or I mean the frame into the painting, and attach your canvas to the back. Then for regular watercolors, I have not done it yet, but you can take your watercolor paper, and I don't think I have a painting right next to me, but there is a process out there that you can varnish your watercolor painting. And the way to do it is not something that I have experienced yet. I have some of the supplies, but I haven't actually done it yet. But you do still have to start by spraying it with a sealer, and very gently, and get maybe 6 to 8 coats on there before you would use a liquid varnish on top of it. And there are other videos out there. There's information from other artists that have done this process, that I would look up varnishing a watercolor and see what you can find. I know Matthew Bird has an article out on his website, and I know there are other artists that may have YouTube videos out talking about the process. So that might be something to look up. And then along the same lines as the watercolor canvas, let me move these guys out of the way. There is a surface called Aquaboard, and Aquaboard is, let me grab. I just realized this is actually a watercolor canvas. This is not on Aquaboard. So this is another framing style, and it has, it kind of looks like it has a matte because it's got that wider surface, and then it's open in the center, and I just attached the painting at the back side. And so this is on watercolor canvas again, and it is sealed. And then this one is the Aquaboard, and this is just the surface, no painting on it yet, and it is available in different sizes, and it has a clay type of surface on it that the paint will attach to. And then it's the same kind of thing as with watercolor canvas. You can seal them, and then you could use this kind of frame to attach it to, and then you wouldn't have to have matte, and you can buy pre-made frames. And these do come in standard sizes. So this one is 18 by 24. There are small ones, square ones. There are some that come with a wide border so that it's kind of on a box. And those you wouldn't even necessarily have to have a frame for. You could just seal it. You could paint the edges if you want, or leave them wood. I've seen both ways. and then just hang it that way. And that would be kind of like my hummingbird. And for the Aquaboard, it might have a wood side, or it might be white, or you could just paint it however you'd want, and then just hang it like this. And then for my watercolor paintings, I use plexiglass almost on all of them, except for every now and then I may buy a frame that has glass, or if a customer wants glass instead of plexi. And the reason is I send a lot of my paintings to exhibitions, and the exhibitions don't want glass because it could break in shipping. And so they require plexiglass. So that has just become a standard for me. But I do know for the difference in price that glass is actually less expensive to buy than the plexi. And it can depend on where you're buying it, of course. And I buy my plexiglass from my local hardware stores, and then I cut it down. So that saves as well. Get this out of the way. And I was trying to think if there was one more thing I was going to mention. The mats and mat board that I use are the more professional grade. They are, whoops, my camera's going in and out of focus. Let me grab the hummingbird. Focus. Okay. They are the professional grade mat board, and museum quality is what I'm trying to say, not professional grade. So I'm using mat board and backer board that is not going to cause acid to leach out onto my watercolor and possibly damage them. So that is an expense that I choose to add on to my framing costs, because it is important for me to make sure that my watercolors are going to remain in good shape over time. And so for me, the cost is worth it in order to protect them. You can get mat board from local craft stores. You can get your backer board. I just wouldn't use cardboard. I would use a foam core for your backer board. The cardboard is definitely made of acid, but you may find foam core and mat board that has some protection, because most of the mat board and foam core that you can find at like a craft store, those are generally the outside of those are generally acid-free, but the interior might have acid in the materials on the inside. And so I would just, ask around if that's something that is important to you. Then I would look for museum quality mat board and backer board. My local art store carries some of that as well, so I can purchase some of the supplies from there if I want to. And then some of the online framing stores, or not framing stores, art stores carry some of the supplies. So I buy my mat board from Dick Blick. And it's the Rising White is the company is Rising, and the white is the color I get. And again, because I'm framing for exhibitions, I use slightly off-white mat. They only want white or off-white, and partly to make their exhibition look uniform, and then also to focus on the artwork and not have the mat maybe competing with it. So, and then the other thing about framing is that nowadays there seems to be a leaning more toward frames that are simple. And I have one I can show you, but I didn't bring it over with me, so I'll grab it right quick. Okay, so I have a couple frames here. These are from American Frame, and a basic wood frame, and it's not very wide. This is a coffee, I believe, the color. It's a dark brown, almost to black, and it's kind of wide on the side, so it's got a little bit of depth to it, and then I think it's about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide here. And so that's one. And then this one is got a little bit of texture. I think you might be able to see that in the camera. And it is I think it's charcoal gray, and it has a little bit of texture to it. And it, again, it's got some depth, and it's about 1/2 inch to 3/4. And so these are just a couple examples of some frames that I have used and like, and it tends to be what either shows are wanting, and I think a lot of customers are wanting right now. They are liking the basic kind of simple frames and not something very detailed. And that obviously can change, and it can depend on the customer's taste and or their interior style. I'm going to get these out of here because they're reflecting the lights. And I'll bring the hummingbird back. And so I think really it can be to go back to the how do you keep from spending a lot on framing is one, maybe investigate doing it yourself and buying a mat cutter and possibly looking at the less expensive mat board and foam core and things like that for a while. I would price out maybe glass and plexi, and it depends on how comfortable you feel cutting either of those. There may be a company in your town. I have a company called City Glass that they can cut the plexi and the glass for you if you don't want to do it yourself. So there may be something like that in your city or town. And I would just investigate some of those things. And then there are other companies besides American Frame for frames, and so you could look around. I am happy with the quality and the work that goes into creating the frames from American Frame, and so that's why I promote them. They don't give me any cutbacks. I'm not working with them, anything like that, but I just really like their product. So I really don't have much more than that. I hope that helps. And if you have something, a tip, trick, or technique that you would like to see in watercolor, please leave a comment below. And if anyone that is watching has another suggestion for how to frame a watercolor and keep the cost low, please feel free to leave those comments below as well. And then if you're interested to see how I do my matting and framing, I will have that video. There are a couple times where I walk in front of the camera, but it only lasts a few seconds. And I will see you next week. Thanks. And stay tuned for the sped up framing section. Bye. So I have my mat cutter out, and I am matting a large painting that I just finished. That is the foam core backer, and I tend to cut the outside edges of the foam core and the mat board first. And so I'm using the flat blade to cut that. And my mat cutter has a square arm at the bottom, and so that helps hold everything. And you can get the Logan mat cutters in different sizes and price ranges and things. I like the one that fits the large mat size that I always buy, and that's 32 by 40. So I am now cutting the mat itself, and I do double mats, and so I'm cutting 2 pieces of mat board. And one of the things that I like about cutting the mat myself is that once I cut the windows out of the mat, as you'll see in a few minutes, then I have that board from those windows that I can keep and use for another painting. And so it just saves some money that way. And then this has a guide that you attach to it, and that's what I was doing right there. And when you're doing a double mat or just cutting a mat in general, the bevel blade that I will be using next can cause a groove on your mat cutter. So they suggest in the instructions for Logan to always place a piece of thin mat board on the board underneath your mat that you're cutting. So now I'm starting to cut the top mat, and when you're doing a double mat, you cut the top mat first and you cut it 1/4 of an inch narrower all the way around. And those instructions are something that came with the Logan mat cutter, and it's weird at first. Your bevel that you're cutting is actually backwards, so you're cutting the mat from the back side. And so now I have that one piece of mat, and that's my top mat. And then I go over it with double sticky tape, and this is acid-free tape. I ran out, so I'm having to replace it. Okay, so now I have the tape gun ready, and now I am applying tape on all the edges. I want to make sure that the two mats are going to stay attached together. And when I'm doing a larger mat, I will add 2 rows of tape, and then a little bit to the center. And then I just get it all set up and ready to cut. And now I'm going to cut the widest, I'm going to cut the mat so that it's the exact size that I need. So I am getting set up, and I always draw the line so I know where to start and stop my beveled blade cutter that I'm using. And it's always a good idea to check and double check, and so I write down the sizes of my paintings, and I figure out what mat size I'm going to need before I order frames and all of that, so I'm always referring to that. And so now the 2 pieces of mat are double mat, and I think you can see that double edge there. And then I'm just checking to make sure everything's lined up, and then I will get my linen-free tape out. And so that tape comes in a huge roll, and it takes a long time to work through a big roll. So that's a supply that, even though I don't remember exactly how much it cost, but that cost over time, it's not very much per painting. And then I am just using a little bit of water on my finger to wet those pieces of tape and apply them at the top edge. And for this painting, I chose to use 5 pieces or 6. I think I used 5 pieces. And you just kind of have to press them down until they really hold their place. And I am not a professional framer, so there may be other ways to do this that are better, but this is what I use and how I learned it. There used to be a company in town that you could go and use their supplies and buy a frame from them and then frame your artwork at their store. And so that was part of where I learned. And I will cut out the sound in the video right here, but I am basically scoring the plexiglass. And I found with some of the plexi recently, I had to score it more than I generally might have to in order to keep it from cracking. So then once I have it all scored and ready, and I have to do one more angle in order to get it the right, or not angle, but one more side to get the right size for this painting. And I leave the covering plastic on there while I am scoring it to make sure that I don't accidentally scratch it, and just protects it until I'm ready to use, or ready to put it on the painting. And then I'm going to kind of clean up the space because I want to make sure I don't have a lot of dust and particles and things laying around. And then I'm trying to be careful removing the plexi so that the plastic on the plexi, so that anything that might be on the surface doesn't transfer onto the plexiglass. And then I use ammonia-free Windex because I want to make sure that it's not going to leave little pits and grooves. And then once it's completely dry, and that's kind of hard to tell because it's sped up, I lay it over the surface of my mat and remove the other side, and then I can clean the top. And now I'm using the same ammonia-free cleaner and just finish getting that clean. And then before you put something in a frame, you need to make sure that there's no little hairs or little dust things. So part of it is, at this point, I'm just checking it, making sure I don't see anything. And I think I might have. I'm not sure why I moved the frame. Yep, something under there. Oh, I think I saw on the surface of the mat, it kind of looked a little dirty, like someone's fingerprint, maybe when they were packaging it, was on there, so I cleaned that. And then I use a framing gun. This is a point gun. It's called a point, P-O-I-N-T. May have an E, don't quote me on that, to attach the little pieces of metal at the back. And then I decided it was a little dusty and dirty from cutting the mat, or cutting the plexi, so I went ahead and vacuumed off the back of it. And then I always apply 4 points at the back of the painting, 1 on each side, and then check it again. So at that stage it will hold in the frame, and then I can check it and make sure there aren't any other issues. And now I'm just applying the points on all the different sides, and I usually give somewhere between 3 to 4 inches between the points. And with a bigger painting I will use a few more than I will on a smaller one. And that is the basic frame part. And then I will be applying a brown paper backing, and the dust cover is what that's called on the back. Helps keep moisture out of your watercolor painting, and it also can keep dust and dirt from getting in there. And plus it gives it a nice finished look. And I'm using, this is just a multi-purpose Elmer's glue. And I've put it in a bigger bottle because it's easier to use from this bottle. I think that's an old mustard bottle that I reconnoitered to use the glue in. And it works pretty well for me to do one side at a time, kind of folding over the edge and really pressing, because it can take a few seconds for that glue to take hold. Depending on your frame as well, some frames have a very smooth surface to the back, like they've got a coating on them. And so if it's not straight wood, then sometimes I will use my double-sided sticky tape to attach the paper backing instead of glue, because the glue doesn't really hold. You can also take some sandpaper and basically sand the back of your frame before you would attach it to anything, and then that would also allow you to use the glue rather than the sticky tape. And then in order to give it a nice clean finish, I take my X-Acto blade and a ruler, and I come in about anywhere, probably about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and just go ahead and remove that extra paper all the way around. And you will see me apply, I think, actually I'll wait on that because I'm not positive that I do. My painting the wire about 1/3 of the way down on the back of the frame. So that was just something I was taught to do that way, and so I measure, and I will sometimes give anywhere from 1/2 inch to another inch beyond that down the frame. I do know some places, some shows actually want the wire higher and they want it almost flat at the top, and so it can depend on who's doing it, what gallery it might be by hanging in or where it's hanging. And then I just use a finger measure to measure the wire at the top, and I'll give it maybe 2.5 to 3 inches to keep the wire below the top of the frame, so that when it's hanging you're not going to see the hook that it's hanging on. And then I roll the wire around. Those are D-rings that I use, that I attach on the sides. And I am getting a card. I have my business card that I have my information on that I attach on the bottom. And I like to take 2 pieces of clear packing tape. I also have a copyright information little sticker that I put on there. All right. Thanks for following along. And I hope this was helpful. And I hope you'll give it a try. All right. See you next time. Bye.